Hey, what's up everyone, and welcome back to another video. In this video, we are going to rapidly build and deploy a Python-based API. So by the end of this video, you will have your own endpoint that you can hit from anywhere in the world. You'll have documentation for API endpoints that you set up that you can test live on a website. And you will be able to just wrap like any Python code that you have within this API framework. So super useful functionality. If you're not familiar with APIs, it stands for Application Programming Interface. And in this software world, it's basically the way for any systems to communicate with one another. So let's say you wanted to tap into the OpenAI technology. Well, you might use the OpenAI API. Let's say you wanted to make financial transactions on a website that you are hosting, then you might use the Stripe API. APIs allow us to integrate with all other systems. They're just all over the place. Being able to work with them is super important, but also being able to deploy your own code through APIs is also very important. So that's what we're going to cover in this video using some simple Python-based libraries. I'll make sure to put the code for this video down in the description, so check that. And if you have any questions throughout the video, just be sure to let me know in the comments. As an example for this video, we'll be building a book review API. So this would be used in the context of, let's say, like we were building a mobile app to review all sorts of books. An example app would be Goodreads would do this. But basically, we want to be able to have an API endpoint that can post books that we like and a rating to a database. And then we have an API endpoint to get all of the books that we've added to the database and sort them and just do all sorts of fancy things so we could display that in an app. So by the end of this video, you'll have something like this. So you'll have some endpoints set up. You'll have some endpoints set up, and you could add more endpoints than just what I'm showing here, but we would have an endpoint that would let us, let's say, add books to a database. So I'm currently reading this series, Red Rising. It's been really good so far. So I would probably give that like, I'm still early on, but like a 7.6 out of 10. And I'm a hard rater. Run that. Record added successfully. And then behind the scenes, we'll have a database. We're going to use Airtable as a simple database that we can use for this video. But as we see in this database, we now have that new rating for Red Rising within there. And then, also within this API, you could have an API endpoint to get all of your books. So let's try this out. I want all 5 books or so. We'll sort it in descending order. And we get all of the books that we've rated. And you also actually have, so right now we're using localhost, but you'll actually have your own like deployed endpoint that you could hit anywhere in the world. So that's a little bit about what we're building. I think it should be super educational and informative. Let's get into it. Okay, to get started, I want you to go to github.com/KeithGalli/Python API example, and I'll leave that link in the description, so you can just click on that. Within the master branch here, there's some instructions on how to get set up. The first thing you'll probably want to do, because we do want to deploy each of our servers to the cloud, you'll probably want to fork this repo just so you have your own copy to work off of and you have full control of. So you're going to click the fork button up here. And then once you've done that, you can go ahead and clone this code locally. There's some starter code here. And with this API, I think it is important to kind of have a base to work off of. There's always the balance between like starting fully from scratch and having like a template. I don't usually remember everything with the details here of how to set these servers up. So I like to have a template to work off of, and then I can add the code that I need to as I go along. And I think I just recommend doing that for you as well. Some key libraries that we'll be working with here are Flask, Flasgger, that lets us make documentation. So open up a terminal window, however you like to do this, and you're going to want to create some sort of directory. So I'll make a directory called like code, cd code, and I'm going to go ahead. So imagine you've already forked this. You're going to want to copy this command and make sure to fill in your username. Go, and another way, if you are using your forked one, you can just take this, copy this link. This should be your username here, not mine. Go ahead and go git clone, paste that link in, and we should have it. Cool. So if I then navigate into the Python API example, we see we have the files that we need. So we're going to be working off of this main template.py file. So as a quick sanity check, I guess there's a couple steps we need to do. One thing you'll see in a lot of Python repos is this requirements.txt folder or file. That's a way that you can add all the libraries that you'll need for a specific repo and just install it in all one go. So you're going to want to install all of these Python libraries with pip install -r requirements.txt. Let's go ahead and do that real quick. Sometimes you might want to do this in a virtual Python environment, but I think that probably using your base installation will be just fine. Pip install -r requirements.txt, run that. Looks like that command's not found. Pip3 for me. Might be pip, it might be pip3 for you. Run that. And basically you'll see that I already have all of these libraries installed. Great. Now the real test is, let's just see if we have the base template that I provided in this repo running, main template.py. So we're just going to want to run Python3 main template.py. Run that. You should see basically this Flask server pop up running on one, this is our local host. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this into my browser. Oh, what the heck just happened? Don't worry if you see this not found here. The cool thing is with this Flasgger and with this template that we've created, right from the start, we have this /API docs space, and you'll see you have a sample endpoint there, which just uppercases text. So let's dive into the code and see what we're talking about with this template code. So you're going to want to open up this repo. I'm going to use Visual Studio Code to do this. So open folder. We just created code, Python API example. I'm going to open this up. Yes, I trust the authors. Main template.py. Let's see what we have in there. So we see that at the top we import some libraries that are important to us. Most useful ones, the most important ones are the Flask, Flask-Restful, and Flasgger. Flasgger just makes the API docs that we're going to use in this video, which is pretty cool. And then you're going to see that there is a sample endpoint in here. So I'm going to zoom out so that you can see this all right. Uppercase text, and it's a GET request. So the two main requests that we'll probably deal with are GET and POST. There are others, which I'll throw up on the screen real quick. You'll mostly see GET and POST. You might also see like puts a decent amount. You might see deletes a decent amount. But GET and POST are definitely going to be what you see most frequently. Cool. So through Flasgger, we can define doc strings like this. And this is kind of why I like to have the template, because this format gets pretty difficult to just generate on your own. So working off a template makes it easier to actually spin up something. But basically this takes in text. It's ultimately going to return that text in uppercase here. So let's try this out. I'm just giving you a feel of this API. We'll actually start writing code in a second. So how can we try this out? We'll go to the localhost /API docs endpoint once you're running this. And you can click try it out. Text to be uppercase. We're going to just do the good old classic hello world. Execute that. And we see that in the response, we get text hello world back. Cool, it's working. It also shows you kind of like a sample string that you could send as an API request to get the same result. I'll also show that real quick. So our base URL here is going to be /uppercase. And we could run the same basic code by creating a new file real quick. I'm going to make it a Python file. I'm going to save this as API request test.py. Hopefully it's in that same folder. It is. And when you're making API requests with Python, you're usually going to use a requests library. So we're going to import requests. Our base URL is going to be equal to HTTPS, or I guess HTTP localhost /5000. This is the same thing as the -127.001 that we saw. And we specifically want the endpoint uppercase. Cool. And then we want to pass in some params. So our params are going to be equal to text. Let's do hello world. I like that. It's auto-completing it. And then we're going to do response. Look at this. I'm using a Copilot within VS Code, and it's doing a pretty good job at filling these details in for me. Requests.get base URL params, etc. And so now if I run this, print response.json, and we run this file, we get an error. Fun. What's going on? I'm going to try changing something really quick. Right now in main template, we are returning this JSONify. I actually was having, I think, better success not doing that and just doing this and then passing in the status code too. So let's just change it real quick to that. I think our server should still be running, as we can see, and it automatically will restart. Try running this again. Looks like it still worked. We could try a different example. Okay, it's still working. So let's see if our Python API request now works. It is not working. Did we pass in? Maybe I do need to put this as 127.0.0.1. Oh, interesting. I don't know if the file is just not running properly. We used the wrong base URL. I thought the localhost would work here, but I guess not. So just make sure you use whatever is being passed in the terminal here. So that's our base URL. This will change when we actually deploy it to the cloud. We see hello world. Great, that's cool. Another way is you actually can just pass this text in the string here. So you could pass this as this is basically what it's doing behind the scenes, but I'll just show you that if I removed this and just passed in this base URL with this string there, watch what we get with our, we still get hello world, and just to show you that that's actually reading it from there. Add some O's, why not? We see that it gets uppercased still, cool, but I do like it. I think it's neater if we just do it this way. And then one last thing to show, sometimes it's important to know if you got an error or not. So you can do response.status code here too, and you should see that 200 that we set as the second parameter. And for whatever reason, it's saying 500. I don't know what's up with that. Oh, because we didn't pass in the expected, the required parameters. So 500 is an error, 200 is a success. Perfect. Sweet. So this is like baseline, you got the code running. Now let's start writing some code. All right, let's keep up this momentum and let's start actually adding some code or just seeing how we could tweak and add more endpoints. So this main template with these doc strings was sufficient to get us up and running and have a simple GET request that uppercases text. Not the most interesting example in the world. So let's start seeing how we can do some more interesting things with our endpoints. And reminder, we can go to /API docs here to see the documentation here. So uppercasing text is great, but let's just try to do like a little bit more sophisticated of an example where we duplicate and uppercase text. So we're kind of doing this string modification. So there's just a couple of parameters. So our parameters are basically going to be a string, so some text, just like we have here. Then we're going to do a duplication factor. So how many times should we duplicate that text? So if our text is hello world and the duplication factor is 5, we're going to get hello world, hello world, hello world, hello world 5 times. And then we'll do an optional argument. So these next two, the duplication factor and a capitalization argument are going to be optional, and capitalization is just what it sounds like, uppercase, lowercase, etc. So we're just kind of building off of this, and I'm just showing you how I would approach adding another endpoint. This is going to be another get endpoint. So I use a get request when I'm not modifying anything on a database, when I'm usually pretty sure of getting the same type of result back every time I run the same arguments. That's when I use a get request. So let's make a new get request. So the way that I go about this is that I like to just describe it. I like to be very modern and describe it to like a ChatGPT and pass it what I already have and let it try to generate something new based off of that. So I'm going to go ahead and pass all this information. I'm going to go up to ChatGPT, chat.openai. I'll use 3.5. I'm paying for GPT-4, but because this is the free tier, let's just show you what it can do as well. So I want to create a new GET request endpoint. This endpoint should require a text field called text, and then have two optional fields, duplication factor and capitalization. The duplication factor is the number of times that you should repeat the text field when you return a result. And the capitalization is either upper, lower, or none, and accordingly, upper cases the text, lower cases text, or doesn't modify capitalization at all. Use the following code as template to generate new code. All right, we're going to pass in our code. This is everything we have really in the file so far. And let's see what it generates. So we got this process text endpoint now. We see it has a few different fields: duplication factor, capitalization, and it even gives us the Python code. So I like to kind of do this. You might have errors as you run this, but I think it's just a quick, easy way to add another API endpoint to do something. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this code, go to my Visual Studio Code. We see all of our code there, very small, zoomed out. I'll zoom in a sec. I'm going to go ahead and paste all of this. This is our process text endpoint. Now we have two endpoints here. Zoom in and kind of just show you this slowly. So again, process text takes in text. This is required. And then these other two parameters are not required. And this one needs to be one of these options. So if I, let's see, actually I think this will automatically regenerate the endpoints. It might have some errors. Looks like it's restarted and it's active. If you ever need to restart your endpoint, you could always do a Control-C and rerun that Python3 main template code. Go ahead and go back to our docs. We'll refresh this. Where is it? Okay, that's weird. Oh, we didn't save the file. That's usually helpful. Okay, cool. Now we have two API endpoints. And if we try this out, what's something fun? I'll do the classic YouTuber. If you're enjoying this video, make sure to like and subscribe. And because I'm a hardo, I'm going to say 100 times. And because I'm even more of a hardo, we're going to uppercase this. So if I run this query in this little example tester, we execute that, and you get the aggressive like and subscribe processed text. That looks cool. You see how it's duplicated a ton and uppercased properly. We could go ahead and also run this with our API request test. If we look at how we set this up in main template, the extension now is /process text. So we should change our base URL to process text. Like plus subscribe. And I'm going to just show that we could just run it like this. And I'll do response.json to get the actual text. So you see that doesn't do anything, but if we add additional, one of those optional parameters, so we could add like the duplication factor, make that 3. Run this again. We see we get it 3 times, and maybe I should add a space after this so it's more clear. Look at that, like plus subscribe, like plus subscribe, like plus, can't even speak. Cool, and then finally we can show like capitalization. I should probably surround this with quotes. I really can't type today. We'll make it upper. Yeah, I like that. Run this again. Look at that. Cool. This code right here, ultimately, like by the end of this video, we're going to replace this with like an actually deployed endpoint. If you tried running this without actually running the server locally, you wouldn't be able to access this. This is very much a local endpoint. And the difference is when we deploy this to the cloud, that endpoint becomes accessible to all people, unless you have like, API security or something in place, some sort of API key required to access these endpoints. That might be for a future follow-up video. Cool, so a reminder what we just did. We queried our good friend ChatGPT, and we see that it generated this new endpoint for us. Note, to get these arguments that we're passing in when we test out this endpoint, we see we get our text here, we get our duplication factor here, and it's just converting it to an integer so we can work with it properly. It's going to, by default, I think, get it back as text. And we get our capitalization argument here. Those are not required, so that you see the none and the 1 here. That's kind of giving it a default value if you don't pass it in. The code to actually process the text is here, as well as process the capitalization stuff is here. And then finally, we return the result here with a 200 status code, which is a success. And note, like the cool thing here is we could put any Python code we wanted in this, the bulk of this code. So like if you want to start getting your own API endpoints that wrap your code, you can pass it in here. This is pretty cool. All right, now let's go ahead and see how we can deploy this to a live endpoint like on the internet. We're going to write some more sophisticated code, but I just want to show this right now, and then we'll add to it and make something more interesting. So real quick, the way that I do this, the simplest way is like you could always deploy on a cloud service like AWS, Azure, GCP, but I feel like they make it a little bit more difficult to get this Flask deployment up super quickly and just like accessible right away. So a service that I've liked a lot recently to wrap this functionality and deploy it super quickly and easily is a platform called render.com. So if you go to render.com, create an account, and then link your GitHub, I added some details on how to link your GitHub, or at least a link to the README on the GitHub, so you can check that. Once you link your GitHub, create an account, you have the ability to create services, and there's a lot of free tier options, so we'll just use a free tier option for now. There are some downsides of the free tier, but I think it's perfect for getting started. So we're gonna go ahead and create a new web service, and we'll call this build and deploy from Git repository. Yes, we wanna do that. We wanna do the Python API example. We'll connect that. We'll call this like book review API. How about that? If this name is not unique, it's going to give you a little bit of a weird URL. So I might just for the sake of it, like do kg-book review API. You can choose your region, so probably something that's more closely located to you for the most optimal results. Master branch is fine. We want to make sure it installs the requirements. And then you will want to run this as your start command. Gunicorn is a library to run these Flask apps. It should be in the requirements.txt. So you can just double check that by looking at requirements.txt, and we see that we do have that. So this is good. And then go ahead and click the free tier. Only issue about the free tier is I think it goes down if you don't use it enough. So there's a little bit of a lag time on some of these API calls if you haven't made one in a while, but it should be good enough for testing purposes. Okay, so we are uploading our code now to the cloud. Like it was just that easy, which is nice. You see it downloading the libraries. I'll speed this up. So we can see the logs all here. We're kind of watching the logs right now. I guess we can see the deploy logs here. We see that it's build successful, that's good, and it's deploying. We're kind of just waiting for it to fully succeed. And then one thing that's nice is we have our own public URL here, kg-bookreviewAPI.onrender.com. This is, publicly accessible URL. There's ability to set this to your own personal URL in the settings. If you own like a website or something, if you go to settings and then go to custom domains, they have some instructions on how to set up your own custom domain off of this. Should be, maybe in a follow-up video, I would actually go through this process, but I'm going to just leave and point you to these instructions for now. Go back to our events. This should deploy in any second now. A quick minor tweak I'm going to make real quick. I realized that in our previews, we were showing using the main template.py file. So we actually want to call this main template. And within that, we are running this, we have this app object that we want to call. So I'm going to just actually change the command to main template for now. Cool, we see it deploying and we see it running our command that we just specified on that main template file for now. I'll probably change the name of that to app when it's actually ready to go and we fully made our little book review API. But we see our service is live. That's super exciting. As I mentioned, this is our kind of live URL. We'll see what I do. I might leave this up for a couple days after posting this video. But this endpoint now / is a live public endpoint. I could run this from wherever. And just to show us what's happening, I'm going to run this command. No, issue. And I think I know what the issue is. We go to this link and we do API docs. See, we only have uppercase there right now because if we wanted to have that second endpoint we just added, we actually need to go ahead and do a git add main template, git commit added string, process, what do we call it? Process text endpoint. Git push origin master. And with that, then we'll see what basically within the render platform, if I go to events, it's going to automatically deploy that new build, which is nice and easy. We see our commit message for the new commit we just added. I'm going to speed this up so you don't get bored. Cool. We see deploy live. And so now if we ran that original command we wanted to, the process to text here, run that. Look at that. We get back our result and we're actually hitting a web URL. So that is pretty cool. So now we have a deployed API. I think because I wanted this template to stay a template, I'm going to probably delete the code I just added to it and revert back. But yeah, let's actually set up this book review API now. Hey, Editor Keith here. Realize that we're actually at a pretty good stopping point. So we'll implement the rest of the book API in the next video. So I'll post a link to that right here. Or if it's not quite uploaded yet, I'll make sure that it is uploaded within the week. In that video, we will see how we can do post requests with the Python API. We'll also see how we can push and pull data via Airtable by connecting to the Airtable API programmatically. If you enjoyed this first part, make sure to throw it a thumbs up and also subscribe to not miss any of future videos. Thank you all for watching. This was fun. Till next time, peace.